Today we're talking about the Emperor, number 4, key number 4 in the Tarot of the Spirit. Let me interject right at this moment that the Tarot of the Spirit is very specifically and explicitly a Kabbalistic tarot. And what that means is that it is 100% based on the teachings of the Tree of Life. And every card was painted on a diagram of the Tree of Life. So it's holographic too, because each card contains all the rest, the entire tree, and then each card is also contained within the tree. And I mention that right now because there are many ways of coming to the tarot. There are many ways, many doorways that you could walk through to the tarot. And there are a lot of tarots out there and a lot of tarots on the market. So this is what we're doing today is part of the Western Mystery School tradition, which is based on the Tree of Life and which is Kabbalistic. So the Tree of Life is essentially a diagram that is a teaching diagram that shows how to organize information and knowledge. And the word Kabbalah means to receive. And Kabbalah is really the knowledge you receive when you step into that step-by-step pathway of the Tree of Life and open yourself to receive, essentially. Okay, so I wanted to start with the Emperor as number 4 and what the meaning of 4 is. So one of the things that I like to do with teaching the tarot a lot of times is to do what I call the geometry lesson. And I wanted to back up a little bit and to go into 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4 as just a very small review. So if we begin with 0, 0 represents it's a circle, right? But essentially what it represents is the field. It's the Fool, but it represents the field. So you could think of 0 as being, let's say, a screen, a huge screen, like the screen of the universe or something like that. But just pretend like you're looking at a screen or a blackboard or something like that. And then when we move into number 1, what we do is we place a point anywhere on the screen. And so once we have that point anywhere on the screen, that's going to act as maybe it's arbitrary, but it's going to be a starting point for us. So it's a place of beginning. And it also corresponds to the 1 in terms of the emergence of the Magus as the 1, the emergence of the 4 ones, the 4 ones in tarot, 1 of fire, 1 of water, 1 of wind, 1 of earth. Tarot of the Spirit's also a shamanic tarot. Moving into the essential elements of fire, water, air, and earth. So that also sets it apart a little bit. Okay, so the 1s, and the 1s spun together create the beginning of what is. So each individual, such as the Magus emerging as an individual, each individual is made of the fire, the water, the air, and the earth, no matter what individual it is in this universe. Could be an individual planet or a person or a tree, whatever. It doesn't matter what it is, or an atom. It's going to be an individual. Okay, now back to the screen, and imagine that we put up another point on the screen. Now we have a relationship, a potential relationship that is happening. And that will be point number 2. That's going to also correspond to the High Priestess and all the 2s in the tarot, and it will give us a sense of polarization, maybe directionality, maybe. It's infinitely beyond the single point in that it becomes a line, which is infinite points. right? Some kind of a line that we can create. And if you're really creative, you can create a zigzag line, or it doesn't have to be a straight line, but you can do all kinds of things once you have 2 points. Okay, so this is going to correspond to the High Priestess also, and the 4 twos in the tarot. Other cards as well, but I don't want to go beyond that right now. I'm just keeping this very, very simple. Then when we put up a 3rd point on the board or on the screen, okay, what do we have when we have 3 points? What is that? Anybody?
Plane.
Oh, good. Okay, yeah, it can be a triangle, and it can also be a plane. It creates a plane when we have 3 points. Exactly. So you see what that is? It's a leap into creativity. And in fact, the 3rd power, which corresponds with the 3rd point, is called the power of creation. So I'll back up and say 2nd power is the power of attraction. 2 points, power of attraction. And the 1st point, point number 1, can be considered to be the point that indicates a starting point or a point of originality, original being. And that original being, that first moment, came from the origin of all that has been, becomes an original being that, quote, I'm quoting myself, concentrates into a point that is going to have its own kind of character, and then becomes an originating point. And then when you have 2, you've got the power of attraction. So we go from the power of origination, which I also call the power of centration, and then going into point 2, the power of attraction. Going into point 3, we have the power of creation. That's where we get the plane and the triangle. From back to number 3, from a 1 and another 1 issues a 3rd, right? From 1 point and another point issues a 3rd point. So that's like the trinity of the number 3, the power of creation. Okay, now we're going to put a 4th point on the screen, and this is going to correspond to the Emperor. Oh, also point number 3 corresponds to the Empress, right? The key number 3, the Empress. Now we're moving into key number 4, the Emperor, so we're going to put a 4th point on the board. So what do we have when we put a 4th point on the board? Anything. Anybody?
Volume.
Oh, okay. So what about when we put it on the board first?
A square.
So we could have a square or a rectangle or a parallelogram, or we can have any kind of flat, 2-dimensional square type of thing. And so Wendy was jumping ahead, and she said, "Oh, a solid," because indeed, if you put that 4th point off the board, you get your first solid, no matter where you place that point in space. But with the 3, no matter where you put the point in space, you're still going to wind up with the same configuration. It's still going to be a plane. You see what I mean? No matter where you put it in space. So, but with the 4, you get the first solid. Okay, so the first solid, let's say, would be like, for example, a 3-sided pyramid, right? Because you have 3 points on the board, and then you put 1 off the board. So you get this 3-sided pyramid, right? That would be your first emerging solid. So the 4 represents this first emerging solid. So now let's go back to the 4 points flat on the screen. Okay, now what this gives us when we have 4 points flat on the screen, it provides for us a focal area, like an area to look that brackets out the rest of the universe. It selects out with this number 4. So we can select out, we can take it off the screen and turn it into a viewfinder, like a camera. So imagine that we turn that 4 into a camera. We're looking through a camera, and we can point it anywhere and select out the view that we want to have. For whatever reasons we want to choose that particular view. So this is part of what the Emperor is. It creates a viewpoint, and it's something like creating a perspective, because we are selecting out something and then framing it. It's like a frame. It can also be, so it could be like a window frame, for example. And we are going to come back to that. A window frame, like the camera creates a window. And that window and that camera creates something like a context. It gives us a context now. Maybe subject matter plus the context of that subject matter that we are selecting out. Right? Does that make sense? Okay, so we can decide here what size window. This is what creates a perspective too. We can create what size window, decide what size window, or what angle, what angle we're going to choose. And if we want to, we could create a window that is a window onto the entire universe, or we could create a window onto a very tiny fragment of the universe. Either way. The 4 can also create a foundation, like 4 cornerstones, marks where the 4 cornerstones of a building would go. It could create a wall. If we build a wall, we might be able to better demarcate the field that we're interested in. It can create a ceiling, so imagine you look up and you see, these 4 points, here's where we're going to create the ceiling. And it also creates the basis for the idea of grid work, So you could imagine it would be a cell in a grid. I'll just make that up, like a cell. If you have 4 points, you have a cell in a grid. Okay, so this is like a starting point for us. Okay, so that's all on a flat screen, we'll say. I'm just using this word screen, but then we also have our first solid emerging. Okay, so while we're on the solid, what would be a pleasing advantage of a solid? Just make something up, of having something solidified in a tangible way.
You can hold it. Yeah.
Yeah, so you can hold it, you can touch it, it defines it. It makes it manifest, right? It's like a manifestation of something. Maybe something that was on the plane of creativity at the number 3, all of a sudden becomes tangible and solid in the number 4. Okay, so that's very good. That could be a very good thing, especially if a lot of thought goes into it and how we want to create that. Okay, what might be a disadvantage of that solid form, if you can think of anything?
Well, if it can be like a container, which can be an advantage that it can hold something, but it also a container can keep something locked in away from the universe, separate.
Exactly. So it can keep something separate, locked in, and it can also become limiting in one way or other once we have the form set up, So all of the cards are cycles. And maybe when we first move into the 4 and we first discover the solidity, it's really exciting. Here's how we can create this. Here's how we can make this thing happen. But we are capable of, ironically, creating forms that can actually bind us, right? And then we need to find a way to break out. We'll talk about that more later, especially when we go into the Hierophant. But right now, we're going to focus on more moving into the form and that part of it before we're tired of the form. Okay, so like what's the benefit of having this form and moving into it? Because what this number 4 energy does is it is very much related to creating order in the universe, and in a sense pleasing order. of course, any of this pleasing order can get blown up at another time. So we're going to talk about that later, because right now we're going to talk about pleasing order. So this is the fourth power, and whereas the third power is called creation. So I just mentioned those powers, which are origination, attraction, creation, and then the fourth power is called stabilization. Stabilization. So this is what's good about power number 4, and the Emperor is it leads into this place of stabilization. So I wanted to just give you a little bit of background on the word stabilization and what it means. So it comes from the Latin stabilis, which means firm or to stand. Stabil, S-T-A-B-I-L, is not easily moved or thrown off balance. It maintains a position, endures, returns to equilibrium or an original position after having been displaced, and it does not readily decompose. Those are all definitions of stabilization. Stable is Z-A, is Greek for exceeding, for tenacious, and for resilient. And then the suffix shun, T-I-O-N, means the state of or the action of. So stabilization is the action of being exceedingly firm or standing firm. So that's the power of 4. And that is going to apply in some way, not only to the Emperor, but it will be applying to all the 4s in the tarot as well. So we will we'll return to that in a minute. Okay, so this is how the universe stabilizes. It's the fourth power of the universe. Earth, for example, being a planet in and of the universe, is a stable environment. And Earth has stabilized. It's a relatively, we always have to say relatively stable. We can't ever say nothing is absolutely stable anywhere at any time. But Earth has created a relatively stable environment that actually has created the conditions for life as we know it. So Earth had to go through a number of stages to stabilize and then become the medium for this life as we know it to emerge. So I want to read just a few little passages out of visionary cosmology that talk about the Earth as stable, and then this is also a reflection or a holographic aspect of the rest of the universe. So in the beginning, to create and sustain life, Earth had to build up and stabilize the presence of liquid water, the environment where complex organic molecules would be able to assemble. Earth also needed to be able to create and stabilize the conditions that would sustain metabolism and homeostasis and allow for adaptation as the Earth itself was adapting to internal and external changes. I don't want to define all the terms right now, but I just want to give you sort of the overview. So I'm skipping ahead. 3.5 billion years ago, the fundamental life-supporting system of Earth was building up and getting ready to go. Earth is about 4 billion years old, or so, 4 or 5 billion. So 3.5 billion years ago, the fundamental life-supporting system of Earth was building up and getting ready to go. Earth was in the process of becoming a stabilizing organism, continually in the process of adjusting to achieve a comprehensive planetary homeostasis. Earth as a whole was on the way to becoming a relatively stable biosphere. And homeostasis just means it's balanced, and working. Okay, so it's becoming a relatively stable biosphere, and bio means where life could thrive, essentially, a sphere where life could thrive. It has become a very prolific biosphere compared to a lot of other planets, or at least that's how we identify it. A prolific biosphere that scientists expect to thrive for at least another 500 million years in this relatively stabilized state. Earth as a biosphere has essentially gone through 4 stabilized eras. So it does change, but there have been basically these 4 stabilized eras. The first one, I just say these, this is just a briefest introduction. I say these just to give you an idea of what stabilization means and the power of stabilization. So the first era was called the Precambrian era. These are the scientifically defined eras of Earth. Precambrian, and that's when the first evidence of life appeared, bacteria, and so on. Then the second relatively stabilized stage was the Paleozoic era, and this was from about 570 million years ago to about 230 million years ago. And here is when the seas were covering parts of the continents, and there was the first abundant record of marine life, and algae emerged, which was critical, and then trilobites, brachiopods, and marine invertebrates, and then seed plants, and then sharks, many forms of fish with jaws, ferns, reptiles, amphibians, cockroaches. So all those things started coming out. Then we move into the next era. Oh, also there were reptiles in the Paleozoic era. And then we move into the Mesozoic era. And the Mesozoic is 225 million years ago. It began. And in the Mesozoic, we got, you were there, we were there, we got flowering plants and dinosaurs and the first mammals. And then by 136 million years ago, dinosaurs began to disappear. And so with each era, a lot of species go extinct, and then a whole new group of species emerges. So 136 million years ago, dinosaurs began to disappear, and this new wave of insects proliferated. And then by 65 million years ago, dinosaurs went extinct. I mean, you might say, okay, well, did they really go extinct, or did they turn into birds? Because we see birds everywhere around us, but I'm not going to go into that right now. Okay. In fact, the masters of the universe just cut me off. Okay. Then we move into stage 4, the Cenozoic era. And the Cenozoic era is our era, which began 65 million years ago. And here come horses, monkeys, dogs, whales. And then about 35 to 40,000 years ago, modern humans appeared. Well, about 7 million years ago, the first, quote, ape-like humans appeared. That's like 7 million years ago. And then 35 to 40,000 years ago, modern humans, which are Homo sapiens appeared. And then 12,000 years ago, modern human culture appeared and began to spread. Okay, so now we'll talk about humans, because that happens to be the species that we're in. So what's happened with the human collective is we also have had periods of stabilization on this planet, relative stabilization. So first, we identify Paleolithic humans, that's early humans, from 1.6 million years ago to 20,000 years ago. A lot of different species, actually, of Stone Age people. Okay, then we leap ahead to the Neolithic. Neolithic is modern humans, and this is 35,000 years ago to about 5,000 BC. This is when Homo sapiens emerge, and that is who we are. So we are modern humans, these Homo sapiens. Okay, theoretically, we emerged in Africa, and all of us in the beginning. And then by 11,000 years ago, every continent except Antarctica was populated by Homo sapiens. Our species modern humans. Then, okay, this is giving you a sense of stabilized eras. And what we're going to do is we're going to move this into consciousness, our own consciousness. So between 30,000 and 11,000 years ago, modern humans, that's us, developed hunting skills, excellent hunting skills, farming skills. And there was massive population growth. And critical and key for us is something called figuration emerged. And figuration became extremely important in our development. So with figuration, this is when people were making their handprints on cave walls, painting bison, whatever, extracting a symbolic image that is going to have some kind of meaning. And that is one of the great traits and powers of our particular species. And I'm not saying we're beyond other species. I will never say we are beyond other species. I always say we are the new kids on the block. But this power of what is called figuration and what I call symbolization is really important for us because it becomes critical in our consciousness and critical in the way the human universe operates. Okay, so figuration, symbolization. And then what happened was we moved into classical civilizations, which I'm not going to go into. But for example, Mesopotamia, ancient Egypt, ancient India, all having these powers of symbolization. China, places in Europe. And then, okay, finally, now we're really fast forward. This is a whole history of the universe here. This is the history of our universe. Okay, now fast forward up to 1870 AD. Now we're all on the same page. We've all got the same calendar happening here. 1870 AD. The industrial nation state emerges. Here we are. Okay, the industrial nation state emerges, and this is 1870 to the present. I will also throw in, though, which is fascinating, that many historians, and I'm on board with this, many historians, anthropologists, and other people say that we actually launched into the next period around 1980. So we'll see, which is it's the technological age, it's a communication age, it is an age, it's an electronic age. Many things began to change, and that has actually been within our lifetimes. So this is really what we're dealing with in terms of stabilizing. So just think of this. If people are feeling edgy and not knowing what's going on, we certainly are not living in a traditional culture right now that's repeating itself. Okay, we're in a brand new era that has developed out of the industrial nation state. Most of us are still living in the industrial mind. That's the age of the machine, right? And where production changes, the means of production change completely, right? Okay, so these are sweeping generalizations I've made here on the whole history of the entire universe and the planet Earth. I mean, I didn't even go into the universe. Like, don't get me started, the rest of the universe. But that's like the history of the Earth. And then here come the humans emerging. And this is our moment. This is our place to start looking at who we are, where we are, what we're doing, and why we might feel unstable and what we want to stabilize. So you see where I'm going? Right? So the quivering equilibrium of the universe is never completely stable. It's also interesting to think about the idea that we ourselves are still the same Neolithic species. Our species actually hasn't changed. We are the same species that marveled at the sun and moon and the cyclical and spiralic nature of life. And now we've altered our lifestyle completely, not as a result of changes in the condition of our ecosystem or our physiological form, but as a result of changing values changing ideas. Those are the things that have moved us the most. For the Paleolithic human, the sense of place and the aliveness of the natural world comprised consciousness. In Neolithic times, the magic of plants and animals, spirits and fire predominated. In classical and industrial times, empire building and war came to the fore. And that's still going on, right? So we're now moving into this new question, this new era. Yes, it is a new question. This new era, which raises the question, who are we now and what is important now? So it's who are we and who are we becoming? And so I will maintain myself, because we are still the same Neolithic species that we were, we still, like our Neolithic selves, and our Paleolithic selves rather, marvel at the aliveness of the natural world and everything in it. That is still within us. It's not like that is gone. That hasn't gone anywhere. But it's not necessarily activated now that we live in these industrial city-states, or post-industrial city-states. So as we ponder these questions, it's interesting to remember the ways in which we're socialized into stabilizing, reproducing, and enhancing our culture. We are taught how to do this. Our very socialization, in fact, may contribute to blinding us from reflecting on our own situation, even if, or especially if, the situation happens to be harmful to us or to others. Consider this. During the time of the Roman Empire, as in the United States, in order to assure that the bulk of the population was on the same page, public school was made mandatory for every child under the age of 16. With everyone educated with the same curriculum, not only would the empire function more smoothly, but potentially disparate beliefs and uprisings would be kept to a minimum, potentially. So it may be important for us to consider the ways in which we are being educated and what we consider to be important as we actively participate in imagining and creating the new era. This has everything to do with the emperor, as we are going to see in a minute. I'm going to end the visionary cosmology section of this with a story that I love to tell. And I've told this story a lot. It's called The Tale of the Little Tree. And the subtitle is, What Will You Stabilize? Okay, so imagine that a number of baby trees have sprouted up in a field where goats commonly graze. Imagine that the goats, capable of consuming almost anything, are devouring all the seedlings. Imagine you would like to preserve one of the little trees. What will you do? So imagine that you put a fence. Here we can bring in the emperor. 4 points. Imagine you put a fence around one of the little trees. A fence strong enough to keep the goats at bay. Imagine you tend this little tree diligently until it's large enough so the goats can't eat it. Imagine that the little tree in 20 years' time grows big enough to provide shade for the whole herd. That's selecting out. See what I mean? And we are all responsible for that. This is the power of stabilization at work. The universe creates a centrated area, a concentrated area, focuses on that area, and stabilizes it and nurtures it as it comes into being, and then adapts to circumstances. Like if you wanted to keep that little tree going through a drought, you might have to water it, at least in the beginning. Conditions are really important too, because probably that tree wouldn't be coming up unless the conditions were right to allow it to come up wild. You, each of you, me, we all hold the power of stabilization, the fourth power of the universe within ourselves. And this raises the question, this is the critical question. What is important enough to care for, even at the price of letting other things go? What will you pay attention to? What will you stabilize? What will you nurture? So this becomes the essence of the Emperor. What will we nurture? What we nurture, what we are going to nurture, depends on what we value. This is all a question of valuation. If we value something, we're going to take care of it, period. Okay, so to do this, it takes us back to the idea of selecting out, framing, and then getting a perspective on the field of view, our chosen field of view, whatever that might be. To even select out, frame, and get a perspective on something or an angle on it, we have to rely on our values. What are we looking at through the lens here? What do we value? And the basis of whatever it is that we value is going to create our vision. What is our vision? And that vision is related or will create our philosophy. You know, what is our philosophy relating to this? What windows have we been forced to look through? Which is just an interesting thought. You know, when they sit us down and put us in a certain position where we're looking through a certain window. And what windows are we choosing to look through once we free ourselves out of the, I'm going to say trance right now because no other word is coming to my mind. The trance that this is the way it is. Now let's leap ahead for a minute and look right at this Emperor card. So let's look at the symbolization on the card. Okay, there we are in figuration, by the way. See, here we are, you know, in figuration. This is one of our skills as humans, is creating symbols. Then the whole card is symbolic, right? So when you look at the card, what do you see? What leaps out at you? Anything, anybody. What do you see? Just name anything.
Well, I'm curious about why his leg is crossed.
Oh, okay. So his leg is crossed. Okay, so it's crossed
Like a
into,
hangman.
yes, it's crossed into a 4.
Crossed
The
into a
number 4. Okay, so that's going to be symbolic of that. It has something to do with stabilization. Then you're right. The hangman also has the legs crossed into a 4, and you will notice on the hangman is upside down. So, you know, upside down, reversed, 4, like seeing from a different perspective. Okay? So, okay, what else do you see in the Emperor? What else about his legs? Let's look at his legs for a second. What's that stuff on his legs?
An eagle?
It's an eagle. He's got eagles on his legs. What do eagles represent?
Vision.
Yeah, clear sight, right? They're the ones who fly, it's said, highest to the sun, right? So that's the eagle. It's a powerful symbology. It's symbolically, it's the biggest bird, flies highest to the sun. It's got the most power, right? So he's actually got those on his legs. So movement, you know, he is an eagle-legged guy. Okay. All right. What else do you think?
He could act on his vision.
He could act on his vision. He's got movement. He's got the potential of movement. He's barefoot. Yeah, he's barefoot though.
Connected to the earth.
He's connected. He is super connected. He is very connected. Okay. By the way, look at his foot there. What is his foot? What are his 2 feet resting on?
The sword.
So one of them is resting on a sword or a staff. And what do you see at the top of that sword or staff? Do you know what that is?
Ram's
Some kind
head.
of deer.
Yeah, it's a ram. It stands for Aries, and Aries indicates new beginning, fiery new beginning, fiery new beginning. Yeah, Aries, new beginning. Okay, so one bare foot looks like it's resting on that, but he doesn't seem to be in too much pain from that or anything. It seems like he's got it under control. Okay, what about the other foot? What is it resting on?
It says left foot, and it's on the stream.
Exactly. His left foot is resting on a stream. And what that is it's the stream of consciousness that we have seen in the cards leading up to this. So if you look at the other cards, you look at the priestess and you look at the empress and you see the stream of consciousness. And in this case, something that's interesting about the stream of consciousness, if you'll remember some of the other cards, is there is no checkerboard floor. There's no division here. There's no separation. There's no checkerboard pattern. Even completely interrelated, as we've seen, it's different than a black side and a white side or something like that. If checkerboard's all interrelated, but there's not even any checkerboard here. Okay, so there's something very pure about the energy that is flowing through. And what's he sitting on? Can you identify that?
A cube.
It's a cube.
It's a cube, and that cube, symbolically, that cube is an altar that runs through many of the pictures on the cards. And can you guess what this altar is covered in by looking at the pattern? That's a hint. Okay, what is covering the altar? Anybody?
I was going to say ants.
Oh, ants. Oh, that's funny. Okay. Yeah, it looks like ants. Okay, I'm going to tell you. Okay, so what is covering the altar? Do you remember in the previous cards what is the priestess holding and what is the empress sitting on?
The Akashic.
The Akashic scroll.
Yeah, the Akashic scroll, the divine scroll. Okay, see, you see the same pattern here in the cube that the emperor is sitting on? He is actually just sitting on the Akashic records or the divine scroll. So he, again, it shows attunement, this attunement. Okay, and do you see the symbols on the front of that altar? Okay, so one of them is Aries, is a symbol for Aries. And the other one is a Hebrew letter that is, does anybody know what that Hebrew letter is? I'll tell you. Okay, I'll tell you. Okay, I'll tell you. Okay, it is Hey, the letter Hey, which means window. Okay, window. So now let's, since we started at his feet, let's creep up and look at the top of the card. Yes,
Well,
yes.
He kind of looks like there's a diamond shape around him, doesn't it? I mean, it's a diamond drawn around him.
Yes. Okay. So he's inside something like a diamond shape. So let's go up and look. Let's move up to the top part of the card and look at the top part of the card and look at his arms. Look at his hand. What's he? So we see he's holding that staff of Aries in the left hand. What's he holding in his right hand?
Is that Venus?
Yes, it's a staff of Venus. It's called the crux ansata. He's basically looking through the staff of Venus. Okay, see his eyes? See the sight?
Through the hole?
He is both looking through the hole and receiving his sight through Venus. Active reception. He is actively receiving his sight through the power of Venus. You could say the power of the beloved. I'm just throwing that in. So whatever it is, Venus is connected with that power of attraction and bringing things together in that power of attraction. So he is looking straight through that, and it's also the feminine or female receptivity. So he's getting his vision through female receptivity. Okay, so now, what else? Okay, the window. That's what I wanted to mention.
Yeah,
so behind him. Oh, go ahead.
He's kind of he's in and out of the window at the
Yes.
same time.
He is in and out of the window at the same time. So you could say he is the window. Okay, he's on both sides of the window, and he is the window. But so now going back to the diamond, well, we have to use our imagination a little bit to see a diamond, but let's look at the triangular window there. See the triangular window behind him? Okay, so he is looking through this window, and being a triangular window, what do you think that represents? Triangle.
Creativity.
Yes, the power of creation, right? Yeah. So he is something about the power of creation, something about receiving, actively receiving his bare foot on the stream of consciousness. Okay, and so also on the card we see that he sits between the two pillars of the tree of life, and he is in something like a room which is made of these 4 points. Like we have walls, we have a ceiling, we have a floor, but in this case the floor is the stream. Those windows behind him and on the sides of him, those look like open windows. They're opening onto whatever, the universe, whatever it is he's focusing on, whatever he's looking at. There is another triangle that you can see at the top of the card, and you see the triangle at the top of the window? Okay, so that triangle represents the supernal or cosmological triangle of the tree of life, which is where the emperor issues from, and that is basically shows the construction of the universe put together in however it's constructed in the cosmological triangle, or 1, 2, 3. It's the 1, 2, and 3 of the tree of life. Okay, so, and he's got this beautiful blue-green. I was just looking at the colors. It's the blue-green stream of consciousness. The red is for the fiery energy of Aries. Interesting, the blue relates to Bina, the cosmic mother, and that the blue is a feminine color. Okay, now, if we overlay, what do you see?
His head is in dot.
Ah, that's what I was just going to say. So if we overlay the tree of life onto the picture so that now we get some more information about the picture, indeed, we see, actually, the way this fits on here, we see that his face is in the secret sphere number 11 dot. But here's something that's even more interesting. When you look at his face in dot, what do you really see in the middle? What do you see if you just look at
his mouth?
Really? Look again. I mean, it's too obvious, so I'll have to say it. Okay. His beard. You can't even hardly see his mouth, right? It's his beard.
Yeah.
Okay, so what does his beard symbolize? What is the beard supposed to symbolize? Age and wisdom. Okay? So it's wisdom. He's got some kind of wisdom going on. And, his one hand, his right hand is in Gevura number 5. So that shows that he has the power to take things apart if he wants to. But he's holding the staff of Venus, which is really interesting. Now, everybody, check this out. What do you see in sphere number 6? The sphere of enlightenment, higher truth and beauty, and the values that we want to live by.
His womb area, if he had
his womb area. Okay, well, let's call it his genitals. I mean, his genitals are right smack in the middle of number 6, which is enlightened consciousness. So all of this points to an emperor of a let's call it the good emperor. I was going to say like an emperor of another color, but this is like the good emperor. So let's see. Okay, so his power, the emperor's power, as we can imagine from looking at the card, is his sight. Sight is his power. He's got the vision. He receives from the divine feminine. He also sits within the cross of equal arms. He's got a cross of equal arms on his chest. That's the fire, the water, the air, and the earth all coming together and balancing. He also has a cross of equal arms that goes through his pineal gland. And that is the connecting link. The pineal gland is the connecting link between the autonomic and the spinal nervous systems. And what this does is it translates impressions received by the subjective self into impressions for the brain to comprehend. So there's a lot going on in this card.
What about, well, I don't know if that's a hat, but he has that round emblem on his forehead.
So he has a round emblem on his forehead. And for me, what this indicates is the opening of the third eye. And it's kind of like it's like it's kind of like a pilot's hat or something like that. Yeah, and so, but it's yellow. Okay, so we need to note all the color. All the colors in the Tarot of the Spirit are Kabbalistic colors. So every time you see blue, it's going to have a certain meaning. Every time you see yellow, every time you see green or red, and all of these colors, by the way, are listed in the in tables in the back of my book, Kabbalah and Tarot of the Spirit. So there's a comprehensive guide to all the colors. But what I will tell you is that the color yellow, it relates to sphere number 6, to ferret, and that is the sphere of enlightened consciousness. So he's wearing a hat. His hat says his consciousness. This hat says, my consciousness is enlightened. I have enlightened consciousness. Yeah. Is there anything that we missed that you see in that card that you're interested in?
The cross that he's sitting in, that crosses his belt, also reminds me the hilt of another sword.
Yeah, okay. And it could, yes, and which way is that sword pointing?
Up.
Okay. Interesting observation. Hilt of another sword that looks like it's pointing up right in the middle. So in the middle, that would be the middle pillar of the tree of life. And by the way, it would be pointing right up straight through the path of the high priestess into the source of all that is. Okay, if you put that, again, that's with the pattern of the tree of life placed over. Okay. All right, we have been joined by a cat. All right. Now I want to go back to the idea of window for a minute, the window, because this letter, hey, that's the Hebrew attribution to the card, for the card, which means window. So window, the word window literally means eye of the wind, E-Y-E, eye of the wind. And it comes from the Indo-European word for eye, auga, and then vinder, which is Indo-European for window, and then putting it together so it becomes this window, W-I-N-D-O-G-E, which is Old Norse, and it means eye of the wind. And the eye of the wind is a transparent opening or a pane, P-A-N-E, this transparent pane. What the pane is it's something that illuminates the structure of form. And it also, in Indo-European, this word pane, P-A-N-E, also means fabric. Fabric. So the emperor comes into being the eye or window pane of the soul, which also is the illumination of the fabric of all substance. And we are asking basically here with the emperor of what is the fabric created? How does the whole picture fit together? This is the fabric of the universe, the fabric of existence. The emperor knows the nature of structure. The emperor knows what can be controlled and what cannot be controlled, and operates accordingly, and that's the key to his wisdom. So he's working with these energies. As such, the emperor is also known as the Constituting Intelligence. This is my favorite part of the emperor, probably. The emperor knows of what he is constituted. He knows of what the fabric of the universe is constituted. And based on this, he becomes the constituting intelligence himself. He understands the constituting intelligence of the universe. That's what gives him his perspective. And then the question is, and this is us as the empress, out of all that is, what will be bracketed out and selected? What will we bracket out and select as important? And then we will be working within the knowledge of the nature of form. What form is, how it comes to be. So this constituting intelligence is based in, as it turns out, a philosophical grounding of some kind. Okay, because we're selecting what to look at. Instead of looking at what we've been forced to look at, we're selecting what we want to look at. And so this comes to some kind of philosophy. All right, so philosophy, philo means love, and Sophia means wisdom. So the word philosophy means love of wisdom. And that becomes our guide. That becomes the guide for the emperor. And this love, again, is going to be based on what we value. What do we value? That's what we love, what we value. And now I want to cut to, just for fun, the U.S. Constitution. Because the founding fathers, that's exactly what they were doing, was they were saying, what's the constituting intelligence here? What kind of constitution are we going to create, and on the basis of what and why? So I want to read you the preamble to the Constitution, which I think you will love in this new light, okay? I mean, I don't know if you love the preamble, but I think you'll love the intention behind it. Okay, we the people of the United States, we the people. It starts with we the people.
We the people.
There's where it comes from. We the people.
Yeah, in large print.
In large print. In large print. We the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. Okay, so what I want to say is there are several things that are capitalized in here and several things that are not. What happens to be capitalized is the values on which this is based. Union, that's unity. Justice, tranquility, welfare, and liberty. Those are the 5 values upon which the Constitution is based. Unity, justice, tranquility, welfare, and liberty. And then, not capitalized here, we have also, we're going to bracket those values out. We're going to put those in our field, a view. And then, maybe we need to defend them. That's in here. Provide for the defense. And on the basis of this, we do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. It's based on values, selecting out certain values, and you can imagine the background that went into that. So we can ask the question, what does the constituting intelligence have to do with leadership? And there are all different kinds of leadership. Okay, the emperor is going to be a leader. And there are all different kinds of leadership. There's leadership based on force, coercion, persuasion, consensus. And the good emperor is the emperor that is in service, that leads through being in service and sees through these mystical windows and sees the big picture. That is the exalted emperor. Now I want to cut to the numerology of the emperor-fool combination and where that comes from, because the emperor is always going to be connected with the fool. And the reason for that is because in the Major Arcana of the Tarot, there are 21 Major Arcana cards. There's, if you add in the Fool, that makes 22, but the Fool's 0, right? The last card is number 21, the Universe. So the very next card after the Universe would be number 22. And that would reduce to number 4 because 2 plus 2 is 4, but there is no 22. So what we have instead of number 22 is we start over again. We have the 0. And so we're back at the beginning, but we have an imaginary line back to the 4 because it would be a 22. So the 4 and the Emperor, the 4 and the 0 are connected by that numerology. So with the number 22, when we finish the end, past the end, at that point we are returning to question what, how, and maybe even why things are constituted the way they are. So we go back into this big question of the Fool. So the Emperor, as the number 4, contains the whole and the all and the Fool, because all the cards contain the Fool. Why? Because the Fool is 0, the pan-original field space out of which every individual is created. So the Emperor is going to contain that energy within, and it's going to be surrounding the Emperor completely. So the Fool within the Emperor becomes contained within this bounded reality. And we're going to learn a lot more about this in the Chariot, by the way. So I don't want to go into that too much about what bounded reality is. The bounded reality, depending on our viewfinder or whatever, could be something very small, or it could be the absolutely infinite, if that's where our viewfinder is focused, to the absolute infinite. These are the windows we are choosing to look through, the mystical windows. And the exalted Emperor is looking through these mystical windows and seeing all possibility, the possibility that the Fool represents. So the 4 and the 0 are the only 2 Major Arcana cards that hold equal weight numerologically when it comes to your birth card. So if your birth card is the Emperor, it's also going to be the Fool. Okay, so this is an interesting archetypal constellation, the Emperor and the Fool. So can you think of a role or something in our culture that would be related to having both of those things working together within us? I have a couple of ideas. Okay, well, I'll just throw them out since everyone looks puzzled. So, for example, the CEO of a startup could be a great Emperor Fool, because, getting organized, getting clear, and then taking a leap, a huge risk. Like, what's going to happen here? Maybe, quote, the founding fathers were like Emperor Fools. The founding fathers of the United States, right?
Even just being a regular father.
Or being a regular father, being a father. Okay, so we're going to come to that too. So there's a little bit more here. All right. So the divinatory meaning in Tarot of the Spirit, I want to read to you really quickly, if I can find it. My book is so full of pieces of paper I can barely, and markers, can barely find it. Okay, here's the divinatory meaning out of Tarot of the Spirit for the Emperor. Build, this applies to us, if we're going to step into Emperor Fool energy. Build a firm base of clear knowledge. Do not become too rigid. Remain open and lucid. To retain control, know and serve a higher force. Build your world in beauty and light. Do not forget that the Emperor remains Emperor because he has a global sense of things that others do not necessarily possess. Yet, he will be overthrown if he does not serve his constituents. To remain in power, use your insight and serve those around you. So I want to impart a really simple story about what that means. So here's the Emperor in the throne room. I'm just making up a story. And here come the country people, and they're angry. Okay, so they come in and they've got their rakes and their shovels, and they say, you know, we are not happy. We are not happy. So the bad emperor, the unexalted emperor, says, the worst kind of emperor says, get these people out of here. Okay, so that would be the worst. Also, the worst, okay, here's another worst, is take these people to the kitchen and give them some food because it's obvious they're hungry. That is not the answer. The good emperor, who is actively receiving, active reception, listening, the good emperor says, I can see you're upset. Let's talk about this. How may I serve you? And then we have something happening. That's the exalted emperor. So that's the contrast between, so every card's a cycle. And so the up version of the emperor, when the emperor's turned upright, that would be, you know, this person who is really dedicated to service, and that's what this person is doing. The upside down emperor would be the one who is dedicated to control without listening. So this is path 15, it's called, on the Tree of Life, and it connects sphere number 2 with sphere number 6. So the emperor goes from 2 to 6. So it's connecting the 2s. What is the power associated with number 2?
Attraction.
Yes, attraction. And all 4 2s of the tarot, fire, water, wind, and earth, live in that space of 2. And all the fathers live in or around the 2. The father. There's really only one father, but I don't want to talk about that right now. Fire father. Okay. And now the emperor connects the 2s with the 6s, or the 2 with the 6. So the 6 relates to all the 4 6s, 6 of fire, water, air, and earth, wind and earth, and then also the 4 sons or brothers, or the one son or brother that comes down to, which would be the wind brother, lives in or around number 6. Number 6 is the sphere of beauty and truth and enlightened consciousness, and being the first being, which is the brother, just below the abyss, it also represents enlightened consciousness. So the emperor actually crosses the abyss. And elsewhere, we've talked a lot more about the abyss. There's a YouTube on the mystery card, the secret sphere 11, number 11, where there's a lot more about the abyss. So I don't want to go into that right now. But the emperor moves from the supernal triangle, the cosmological triangle at the top of the Tree of Life, down into enlightened consciousness between the father energy and the son energy.
S-U-N.
Both. S-O-N and S-U-N, because the S-U-N is the astrology associated with sphere number 6. And it's also the sphere of the divine S-O-S-U-N. S-O-N-S-U-N. Both.
So a lot of masculine energy.
This is masculine energy. This is masculine emitting energy, but remember, it's powered by active reception, or that's the sight. So the power of attraction is very strong, but as it moves down the tree into the number 6, it turns into the power of reception. And even at the number 2, there's a power of reception straight from sphere number 3 through the path of the Empress. Right? So, and his sight is looking into the female, the feminine. So he's both receiving from the source of all that is, which is sphere number 1, and he's receiving also from the divine feminine, and then carrying that straight across the abyss into the divine sun. Okay, so there we go. So that's a sense of the path. So this emperor is the mediating force between the light realm of the universal force of emission, that's the male force, Hakma, and the the male force in manifestation, Tiferet, the one light manifested on the material plane in the sphere of truth and beauty. So this emperor, which could be the material father or some universal father energy, provides the resolution for a basic male conflict. He sacrifices his life for his subjects. He gives. He serves. He understands the father energy as well as the son energy. He is benevolent. He is compassionate. He is understanding. He is protective. He's a male, containing all those energies. And he takes responsibility for fathering the child, any child. He becomes the archetypal savior then, with the power to redeem the falsely accused and to pardon the sinner. So he's got a lot of power, but his power comes from his wisdom. I want to share with you the lesson of the Emperor from Tarot of the Spirit. The lesson of the Emperor is this: whatsoever you wish to conquer, you must serve. Whatever offspring you wish to beget, you alone must father. Therefore, let thy deeds be the offspring of the path of light. And now we're coming to the end of this lecture on the Emperor, and I want to note that there are musical tones associated with all of the Major Arcana cards, and there's also a chart of those musical tones in the back of Kabbalah and Tarot of the Spirit. And it happens that the tone associated with the Emperor is the musical note C. The colors associated with the Emperor are scarlet, red, brilliant flame, and glowing red. So I'd like you to imagine that red. Just close your eyes and imagine those colors in your consciousness, the colors of the Emperor. And I'm going to read to you the mystery of the Emperor from Kabbalah and Tarot of the Spirit. So just get that red in your consciousness and feel that red energy. The mystery of the Emperor. The vision and the voice are one. The creative hand calls all into being, and yet the word, while essential, is not the essence. Existence is a veil that conceals the structural pattern of the light that is the one life of the unfolding passion of the cosmos. I am on fire with the presence that generates, issues, and sustains. I sustain the beloved, that the beloved may flourish. I create and attend to the systems by which creation stabilizes and evolves. I engage in the power of serving the body of creation. And now the call of the Emperor. May I open a window upon the divine cosmos. May I open this window through prayer, meditation, contemplation, and conscientious reflection. May the highest, purest, most loving powers guide me. May I understand the web of being, the way in which all that is interwoven in the field. May I find compassion for all that is within and without. May I be loving, may I be benevolent, while maintaining a strong sense of clarity of mind. May I realize the gift of material existence. May I see the light field of being as the path for responsive and responsible spiritual expression. May I offer myself in the service of light. May I offer myself in the service of love. May I open to receive the key of the Emperor.